I'm kicking it with Elma. Tune in, baby.
This is Elma here at the Soho Theatre in Dean Street, London. Kicking it with me today is Des Bishop, hailing from Queens, New York City, from an Irish-American background. Now based in Ireland, where he has built a critically acclaimed stand-up career, coupled with 3 successful TV series, and has won rave reviews for his appearances at comedy festivals in Montreal, Melbourne and Edinburgh. His current show is called My Dad Was Nearly James Bond. I've been to see it, and it was very, very funny, moving, and also very thought-provoking. So, Des, how has the London audience reacted so far?
Oh yeah, the London audience has been good. I mean, my audiences, no matter where I go around the world, tend to be a mix of Irish people and the local population. I was expecting a pretty good response from the London audience because, my dad spent a lot of his years in London, and there's elements of London in the show, and also because it's in the theatre rather than like a stand-up comedy club, I was looking forward to it because it's a show that's probably somewhere in between stand-up and theatre, because we talk about some stuff that's not traditionally in stand-up shows, like cancer and death and the relationship between a father and a son. So anyway, it's gone well so far.
Okay, like you said, it's essentially about the life of your dad and his recent death of cancer, lung cancer. What prompted you to write the show in the first place?
Well, the initial motivation behind it had nothing to do with him getting sick, and more to do with the fact that he had lived with a lot of regrets, throughout our lives in New York, about giving up the acting life and giving up, I guess, at least the desire to have some sort of notoriety. I think that was in him, that I guess he had this connection between sort of fame and being well known and being in the public eye and success, And when he let go of that dream, despite the fact that we all had a happy life, in Queens, and he worked hard, he was like a 9-to-5 dad, I guess he had a longing for something else, something more exciting in his life. And at times, you could tell that regret was like a strong presence, And when I became an adult myself, I had a kind of a sadness maybe that after everything he'd achieved as a dad, that he would still hold on to, that discontentment. I think it's common for a lot of people, the sacrifices that you make for your kids. Sometimes you can feel that it's not worth it. So I was motivated to tell the story of like him nearly being James Bond's kind of a hook, really, but just the fact that he had a nearly successful acting career gave it all up for us, and we had a lovely life together. And I wanted to tell that story. But then when he got sick, it was easier to tell the story because he was very impressive in illness, and I think as a result of the way that we all came together as a family, despite everything we'd been through, I think he realized that the sacrifices had paid off, and that his success as a dad was much greater than the fantasy that he wished he had had.
How did he feel about you doing so well and your success on stage? And you've done some acting as well. You've done some stage plays. I mean, he must have been very proud, yeah?
Oh yeah, of course, he was very proud. I mean,
was he jealous?
Well, I don't know, but he certainly let a lot of his fears leak into the way that he engaged with me about my career. I mean, he would just constantly remind me that one day it could all go tits up. It was his own experience. I don't think he was jealous so much, but I think I see it in myself. I think everybody has it to a certain degree. I think people have it in their own relationships, like husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. When somebody close to you does well, there's a part of you that wants to feel like you have something to offer, which is probably maybe motivated by either a hint of jealousy or maybe a fear that you're not part of that, and you want to be part of that. Sometimes there are just certain things about lives that are separate. So I don't know if my dad was jealous, but he definitely wanted to feel like he had something to offer, even though, he did have a lot to offer, but all he really needed to offer was, I guess, kind of pride and, a sense that he was happy. And he was, and he was proud of me, expressed that to me. But I know from others, which is common, I think, his pride came back through other people much more than it did from himself.
Sure, it's easier to do it that way.
Yeah. He wasn't so bad. I've heard more tragic examples of fathers that die, and people meet the kids and say, your father was so proud of you, and they're completely unaware of that. That was definitely not the case in our lives.
Let's go back to your teenage years. I believe you were sent to Ireland at the age of 14. Can you tell me about that? What happened? Why was that?
Well, I was just a very distracted teenage. I mean, like our neighborhood in Queens, like it was not a bad neighborhood. You know, economically it was pretty run of the mill. You know, like everybody had jobs, and I guess the New York economy was pretty strong, so nobody was wanting for much. But there was a lot of children of immigrants, and it was a bit of a tough guy mentality around our neighborhood. You couldn't say why, but that's just the way that it was. And I was very impressionable, and I started drinking very young. I started drinking at 12. I was kind of the youngest of my crew of friends, and so they started drinking around 16. So I started drinking around 12, and a lot of kids were doing graffiti, and those were the things I was attracted to at the time. Doing graffiti, being involved in these kind of like pseudo gangs. I mean, they weren't real proper gangs. Like nobody was getting killed or anything, but we thought we were tough, you know.
This is in the mid 80s.
It was the late 80s, late 80s into the turn of the decade. I just was very distracted. When I went to high school, you know, I had like a greater freedom, I guess. And by the time I was 14, I was drinking a lot, and I was doing a lot of graffiti. And I guess I thought I was kind of tough, to be honest. And I had no interest at all in school, like completely distanced myself from anything. So I got kicked out of the school, not for anything major. You know, I could dramatize the story. I got kicked out of school for total disinterest. They had like an academic bottom line, and I fell beneath it. My parents didn't actually send me to Ireland. This is the thing. I was miserable, to be honest. I was very unhappy. I mean, I was really in the early stages of alcoholism and addiction, you know. So when this idea came up about going to Ireland, I was just like, yeah, great, get the hell out of here. You know, as a lot of people were after me. There was all sorts of this gang-related tension, you know, like some people wanted to beat you up. Some people wanted to beat up people for you. You know, it was ridiculous kind of, it seems silly now, it's teenage angst. But it was very serious to me at the time. I woke up, I had a lot of anxiety for a 14-year-old. So anyway, when this opportunity came up to go to Ireland, I just went, you know. And I was very lucky because it did work out. I completely got distracted from all that stuff. I actually got into school, and I found Ireland really interesting, you know. I found like, it's kind of more of a rural boarding school that I went to. I got on really well with all the guys, and, you know, I guess maybe part of what I was looking for with the graffiti was like some sort of notoriety, some sort of individualism, like so people would think that I was the man. And maybe, I don't know, going to Ireland and being the only American kid, maybe I got a sense of that, you know, and I stood out, and that satisfied that craving in me. So for a time, it didn't last forever, but for a time I found some contentment enough to like get into school, and it, you know, it really did work out, and I like my life is still in Ireland now. I mean, it was a good experience.
It was Wexford. Well, it must have been a massive culture shock.
It was a culture shock. But I mean, to be honest, I was 14. St. Peter's, I mean, as it turns out, St. Peter's is quite a controversial school, but I won't even bother getting into that. But I guess it was pretty rough and ready, you know, like a lot of my schoolmates were children of farmers, and it was great, you know. It was an easy place to be a boy. We messed around, you know, we wrestled, we fought each other a lot, but not like fighting each other because we hate each other. It was just like a lot of messing. And
Horseplay.
yeah, horseplay was great. A lot of sports, active, you know, and I just kind of enjoyed it. So despite the fact that, yeah, it was a massive culture shock, it was a culture shock that suited me. And I mean, I was a pretty outgoing guy, so it wasn't difficult to arrive into a new culture and get to know people. So really, in most ways, it was a positive experience. There were some asshole teachers and some really asshole priests, but it didn't get me down that much.
I'm kicking it with Elma. Tune in, baby.
Can I kick it? Can I kick it?